The space station floated quietly among the stars, but inside, it was full of noise and chaos. Bright lights blinked on every wall, and voices from hundreds of creatures filled the air. Aliens of every size and shape moved through the crowded marketplace. Some had scales, some had fur, and others had metal parts built into their bodies. In the center of this busy place stood a high platform where a group of beings had gathered for something dark, a slave auction. On the platform stood a small alien girl, thin and frightened. Her skin was soft and pale blue, and her large purple eyes were filled with fear. She wore a simple cloth dress, torn and dirty. Around her neck was a metal collar, a symbol that she belonged to someone else. The auctioneer, a tall insect-like creature with sharp eyes, called out to the crowd, "Rare Illyrian child, perfect for collectors or private owners. Trained to be silent. Who will start the bid?" A deep murmur ran through the crowd. The Illyrians were a gentle race, known for their empathic powers, the ability to feel the emotions of others. But her kind had been hunted and sold because of these gifts. The little girl stared at the ground, trying to be invisible as the bidding began. 10,000 credits, shouted a heavy alien with green skin. 15,000. A tall creature with long arms added quickly. As the numbers rose higher, a figure stood at the edge of the crowd, watching quietly. It was a human man, tall and strong, with a rough beard and sharp eyes that seemed to see through everything. His name was Captain Elias Kane, and he had seen many terrible things in his life. But this, seeing a child sold like an object, made his blood boil. 20,000, barked another bidder. The auctioneer rubbed his hands together, pleased with the rising numbers. Kane stepped forward, his voice loud and clear. 50,000 credits. The crowd went silent. All eyes turned to him. The auctioneer blinked, surprised. 50,000. Human, are you serious? Kane stared at him, his face like stone. Do I look like I'm joking? The other bidders muttered among themselves. None of them wanted to pay that much. Sold, the auctioneer said quickly, afraid Kane might change his mind. The little girl looked up, confused. She had never seen a human before. Who was this man? Why did he buy her? Kane walked up to the platform, pulling out a small device from his pocket. Take that collar off. Now, he said firmly. The auctioneer hesitated. But Kane glared at him. Now. Grumbling, the auctioneer pressed a button, and the collar around the girl's neck clicked open and fell to the ground. She rubbed her neck, shocked that it was finally gone. Come with me, Kane said gently, holding out his hand. The girl didn't move at first. She had never known kindness. All she knew was fear. Kane knelt down to her level. His voice softened. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you. Slowly, carefully, the girl reached out and took his hand. As they walked away, Kane could feel the eyes of the crowd following them. He knew what they were thinking. No one spent that much money unless they wanted something in return. But they didn't know Kane. He had his reasons. Once inside his ship, the Starfire, Kane guided her to a small room. It was simple but clean. A soft bed, warm lights, and a shelf with some old books. You can rest here, Kane said. You're free now. The girl sat on the bed, looking around. She had never seen such a place. Kane brought her some food, warm bread and soup. Eat, he encouraged her. She took the bread with small hands, eating slowly, watching him with curious eyes. After a while, Kane sat across from her. Do you have a name? He asked gently. The girl shook her head. Kane thought for a moment. How about Aya? It means hope in an old Earth language. She looked at him, surprised. No one had ever given her a name before. Do you like it? Kane asked. She gave a small nod. Kane smiled. Ah, yeah, it is, then. As she finished her food, Kane stood up. Get some sleep, Edita. You're safe here. But as he walked out of the room, his face grew serious. He knew the slavers wouldn't let this go. They would come for her, And when they did, Kane was ready to fight. Because humans don't leave the innocent behind. Captain Elias Kane sat in the control room of his ship, the Starfire, watching the stars move slowly outside the window. His mind was heavy. He knew taking Aya had put them both in danger. Slavers didn't like to lose something they had already claimed, especially something as rare and valuable as an Illyrian girl. He looked at the small screen showing the room where Aya slept. She was lying on the bed, curled up like a frightened animal, holding a blanket close. She looked so small and lost. Kane sighed. "What have they done to you, kid?" he whispered to himself. Suddenly, the door to the control room opened, and Aya peeked in. She stood quietly, her purple eyes wide and unsure. Kane turned and gave her a soft smile. "Hey there. Couldn't sleep." She didn't answer but took a small step forward. "Come in. Sit." Kane patted the chair next to him. Carefully, Aya walked in and sat down. She kept her hands in her lap and stared at the floor. "You don't have to be afraid here," Kane said gently. "No one's going to hurt you." For a long moment, Aya said nothing. Then, in a soft, shaky voice, she asked, "Why?" Kane blinked. It was the first word she had spoken to him. "Why what?" he asked kindly. "Why? Help me." Aya looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and sadness. Kane leaned back in his chair, thinking about how to answer. "Because what they were doing to you was wrong. And because sometimes someone has to stand up and do what's right." Aya looked down again. "No one ever helped me before." Kane felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Well, now you've got me," he said. "I'm not perfect, but I keep my promises. And I promise you, Aya, I'll protect you." For the first time, Aya gave a tiny smile, though it faded quickly. "Are you hungry?" Kane asked. Aya nodded. Kane stood up. "Come on, let's get something to eat." They went to the small kitchen on the ship. Kane made her a warm bowl of soup and gave her some soft bread. Aya ate slowly, still watching him, as if she couldn't believe he was real. As she ate, Kane sat across from her. "You know," he said, "I used to be a soldier. I've seen a lot of bad things, but I always believed we should protect those who can't protect themselves." Aya tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand. "And you, little one," Kane added, "should never have had to suffer like that." Aya put her spoon down and whispered, They said I belong to them." Kane shook his head firmly. "No, you belong to no one. You're free, Aya. Do you understand?" Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She was not used to kindness. "Where will we go?" she asked softly. Kane leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Someplace safe. Maybe a human planet. Somewhere the slavers can't reach you." Aya's eyes grew wide. "Safe." He nodded. "Safe." For a moment, Aya looked like she wanted to believe him. But before she could speak again, an alarm on Kane's wrist beeped loudly. Kane stood up quickly and checked his screen. His jaw tightened. A ship was following them. "Stay here," he told Aya calmly. "I'll be right back." He walked quickly back to the control room and looked at the radar. A large ship was coming fast. It was a slaver ship. They had found her. Kane took a deep breath. "So soon," he muttered. "They don't waste time." He turned on the ship's communication system and spoke to Aya through the speaker. "Aya, listen to me. We might have trouble. I need you to stay in your room and lock the door." "Okay." There was a pause, and then Aya's small voice replied, "Okay." Kane smiled, proud of her bravery, even if she was scared. As he prepared to make a quick jump into hyperspace, Kane looked out at the stars. He knew the slavers would not give up easily. They would chase them across the galaxy if needed. But Kane was ready to fight, because now he had a reason. Aya. Back in her room, Aya sat on the bed, holding the soft blanket close. She could feel Kane's worry. Even though she didn't fully understand what was happening, she knew one thing. This human was different. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered before. She closed her eyes, whispering her new name to herself. Aya. For the first time, the name gave her a small sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. The Starfire flew quietly through space, far away from the slaver ship now. The stars outside looked calm and peaceful, but inside the ship, Captain Kane knew they couldn't relax for long. He glanced over at Aya, who sat next to him in the control room. She looked tired but calm, her purple eyes watching the stars. Kane smiled at her. "You did something amazing back there," he said. Aya looked down shyly. "I didn't know I could do that." Kane nodded. "You've got a special gift, Ada. It's powerful, but it's also dangerous. You'll need to learn how to use it safely." She looked up at him. "Will you teach me?" Kane paused. He wasn't sure how to teach her something like that. Her powers were a mystery to him, but he wouldn't leave her alone. He gave a gentle smile. "I'll help you. I promise." Aya smiled back, a little more confident now. Just then, Kane's ship computer beeped. "Warning, low fuel. Recommend refuel soon." Kane sighed. "Looks like we'll need to stop somewhere, Aya. I know a small spaceport where we can refuel and rest for a bit. But we'll need to be careful. Slavers have spies everywhere." Aya nodded, understanding. A few hours later, the Starfire approached a small space station on the edge of a dusty planet. It wasn't a big place, just a few landing pads, a market, and some broken-down ships. But it was quiet, and Kane hoped it would be safe, at least for now. As they landed, Kane turned to Aya. "Stay close to me, all right? Don't wander off." Aya gave a quick nod. They stepped out of the ship together. The air was warm and smelled of oil and metal. Aliens of all kinds moved around, fixing ships or trading goods. Some of them looked rough and dangerous, but most were just trying to survive. Kane led Aya to a small shop where a grumpy old alien sold fuel and supplies. "2 tanks of fuel and some food," Kane said. The alien grumbled but nodded, tapping numbers into a small machine. As Kane was busy paying, Aya stood nearby, watching everything. She had never been to a place like this before. Everything was strange and new. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. A tall alien with sharp eyes and long arms stood nearby, watching her too closely. He leaned down and whispered, "You're a long way from home, little one." Aya froze, her heart pounding. Before she could speak, Kane was there, stepping between her and the stranger. "Is there a problem?" Kane asked, his voice calm but firm. The alien smiled coldly. "No problem, just curious. Illyrian children don't usually walk free." Kane's eyes narrowed. "She's with me. That's all you need to know." The alien raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course. Just be careful. There are people who would pay a lot for her." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Aya clutched Kane's hand tightly. "They know," she whispered. "I know," Kane said quietly. "But don't worry. I've got you." They finished getting the fuel and headed back to the Starfire. But Kane couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. Inside the ship, Aya sat on her bed, hugging a pillow. "Will they come for me again?" she asked softly. Kane sat next to her. "Maybe, but they'll have to get through me first." Aya looked at him, her eyes serious. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Kane took a deep breath. "Because I've seen too many good people get hurt while others just watched. I won't be one of those who watches and does nothing." Aya thought about that. "I don't want to be afraid forever," she said. "You won't be," Kane promised. "We'll find a place where you can be safe, and maybe one day you'll be able to help others too." Aya smiled a little at that thought. Suddenly, an alert sounded on the ship's screen. Kane rushed to look. His face grew serious. "They found us," he said quietly. On the radar, a slaver ship was entering the spaceport's orbit. "They're here," Kane said, standing up. We need to leave. Now. Aya stood too, her hands shaking slightly. I'm ready. Kane smiled at her bravery. Good girl. Let's go. As Kane ran to prepare the ship for takeoff, Aya sat in her seat and buckled in. Her heart was still full of fear, but she also felt something new, hope. Because now, she wasn't alone. As the Starfire's engines roared to life, Kane looked at Aya and gave her a nod. Hold tight, Aya. Our fight isn't over yet. And with that, the Starfire shot up into the sky, flying fast and strong, ready to face whatever came next. The Starfire raced away from the spaceport, its engines glowing bright as it sped through the dark sky. Captain Kane kept his eyes on the screen, watching as the slaver ship began chasing them again. They're not giving up, Kane muttered. Beside him, Aya sat quietly, holding onto her seat. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were calm. She was learning to be brave, even when she was afraid. Are we going to be okay? She asked softly. Kane glanced at her and gave a small smile. We'll be okay. I'm not letting them take you, Aya. I promised. Aya nodded, holding onto those words like a shield. Suddenly, the ship shook as a laser blast flew past them, barely missing. Kane gritted his teeth. They're getting closer. He quickly turned the Starfire toward a nearby nebula, a giant cloud of colorful gas and dust. It was dangerous to fly through, but it could hide them. Hold on tight, Aya, Kane warned. It's going to get bumpy. Aya grabbed her seat as the Starfire zoomed into the nebula. Bright colors swirled around them, blues, purples, and pinks, like a storm of light. Behind them, the slaver ship followed, firing more lasers. Inside the Starfire, lights flickered as Kane struggled to steer through the thick clouds. We need help, Kane muttered to himself. Just then, the ship's communication system beeped. A voice crackled through the speaker. Starfire, this is Captain Lyra of the Eclipse. Do you need assistance? Kane's eyes widened. He quickly grabbed the microphone. Yes, we're being chased by slavers. Can you help? There was a pause, then Lyra's voice came again. Hang on. We're coming. Aya looked up at Kane, hope shining in her eyes. Someone's coming to help us. Kane nodded. Looks like it. A few moments later, a sleek black ship appeared from the clouds. It was bigger than the Starfire, but fast and sharp, like a hunting bird. The Eclipse flew straight toward the slaver ship and fired a powerful laser. The blast hit the slaver's side, making them spin. Inside the slaver ship, alarms blared. The slaver captain growled, "Who dares attack us?" But now, with two ships against them, the slavers began to back away. They're retreating, Kane said with a smile. For now. Aya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Soon, the Eclipse flew alongside the Starfire. A woman's face appeared on Kane's screen. Captain Lyra, with sharp green eyes and short silver hair. You've made some dangerous enemies, Kane, Lyra said. Yeah, Kane replied. Thanks for the save. Lyra looked at Aya curiously. That the Illyrian girl they're hunting. Aya shrank back a little, unsure. Kane placed a hand on her shoulder. She's under my protection. Lyra's eyes softened. You're brave to help her. The slavers won't stop. I know, Kane said quietly. Lyra nodded. You better come aboard. They'll be back soon. And your ship looks like it needs repairs. Kane hesitated but then agreed. All right. Aya, we're going to dock with their ship for now. Okay. Aya nodded. Okay. The two ships connected, and soon Kane and Aya stepped into the Eclipse. It was a clean, high-tech ship, much newer than the Starfire. Captain Lyra met them in the hallway. She smiled kindly at Aya. You're safe here, little one. Aya looked up at her and gave a tiny smile. They all went to a room where Lyra offered them food. Aya ate quietly, but Kane kept his eyes on the map in front of them. We need a safe place to hide, Kane said. Somewhere the slavers won't find her. Lyra nodded. There's a hidden human colony on a moon nearby. Not many know about it. They take in people who need protection. Kane looked at Aya, who was listening carefully. What do you think? Aya thought for a moment. Will I be safe there? Yes, Lyra answered. And you can learn to control your powers too. There are people there who can help. Aya's eyes brightened a little. I want to go. Kane smiled. Then that's where we'll go. Lyra stood up. I'll guide you there, but we need to move fast. The slavers will come looking. Thank you, Kane said. Lyra nodded. Sometimes we have to help each other. The slavers take too much from too many. As they prepared to leave, Aya stood by the window, looking out at the stars. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Kane came to stand beside her. You okay? Aya nodded. I think. I'm ready to fight if I have to. Kane smiled proudly. You're stronger than you know, Aya. As the two ships set out together toward the hidden moon, Aya felt a new feeling inside, hope mixed with courage. Whatever came next, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. The Eclipse and the Starfire flew side by side, moving quickly through space. Behind them, the slaver ship was gone. For now. But Captain Kane knew they would not give up so easily. Beside him, Aya watched the stars. Her purple eyes were calm but thoughtful. Are you scared? Kane asked gently. Aya shook her head. Not as much as before. Because you're here, and Captain Lyra is helping too. Kane smiled. Good. You're getting braver every day. Soon, a small moon appeared on the screen. It looked gray and quiet, circling a giant planet with glowing rings. But hidden deep under its surface, there was a human colony. A secret place where people could be safe. Captain Lyra's voice came over the radio. There it is. Get ready to land. The ships flew lower toward a large mountain. At first, there was nothing but rocks and dust, but then a secret door opened in the side of the mountain. The two ships flew inside, into a huge underground hangar filled with other ships, lights, and people working. As the Starfire landed, Aya looked around with wide eyes. It's so big, she whispered. Kane smiled. Yeah, it's a good place. You'll be safe here. Once they stepped out of the ship, a group of people came to greet them. Some were humans, but there were also a few aliens, all looking kind and welcoming. A woman with soft brown eyes stepped forward. Welcome to Haven, she said. My name is Ilara. You'll be safe here. Kane nodded. Thank you. This is Aya. She needs a place to stay and to learn. Ilara knelt down to Aya's level and smiled warmly. Hello, Aya. You're safe now. No one can hurt you here. Aya felt her eyes sting with tears, but this time they were happy tears. Come, Ilara said, holding out her hand. Let me show you around. Aya looked at Kane, who nodded. Go on. I'll be right here. Taking Ilara's hand, Aya walked with her through the colony. It was like a small city inside the moon, with homes, schools, and gardens growing under bright artificial lights. Children played in open spaces, laughing and running. Ilara smiled at Aya. Would you like to meet the other children? Aya hesitated. I don't know. What if they don't like me? They will, Ilara said gently. And if anyone ever makes you sad, you can tell me or Kane. Aya gave a small smile. Meanwhile, Kane and Lyra talked in a quiet room nearby. Will she be safe here? Kane asked seriously. Lyra nodded. Yes. We protect our own. But Kane, what will you do now? Kane looked thoughtful. I'm not sure. I want to stay here with her, at least until she feels safe. Lyra smiled. You care about her. I do, Kane said simply. She's been through too much to be left alone. Back in the garden, Aya sat under a tree, watching other children play. A little human boy with messy hair walked up to her. "Hi," he said. "I'm Leo. What's your name?" Aya looked up at him shyly. "Aya." Leo grinned. "Wanna play?" Aya blinked in surprise. "You want to play with me?" "Sure," Leo said. "Come on." Slowly, Aya stood up. Leo took her hand and pulled her into a game with the other kids. For the first time, Aya laughed. A real happy laugh that made Kane smile when he saw her from far away. Later that day, Kane sat with Ilara as Aya played nearby. "She's been through a lot," Kane said quietly. Ilara nodded. "But she's strong. And with friends, she'll heal." Just then, a soft alarm beeped. Lyra walked in, her face serious. "They found us," she said. "The slavers. Their ship is in the system. They must have tracked you here." Kane's jaw tightened. "We have to protect this place." And Aya. Ilara stood. "We won't let them take her. Haven has defenses." Kane looked at Aya, who was still playing, laughing now. His heart tightened. He didn't want her to be afraid again. "I'll help you fight," Kane said firmly. "I won't let them hurt her." Lyra nodded. "Then we'll stand together." As night fell in the hidden colony, Kane sat by Aya as she watched the stars from a window. "They found us, didn't they?" Aya asked quietly. Kane sighed. "Yes, but we're ready this time. And I'm right here with you." Aya leaned against him. "I'm not scared anymore," she said softly. Kane put an arm around her. "Good, because you're not alone, Aya. You have me. And now, a whole family here." Outside, the stars shone brightly in the sky, and the colony prepared for whatever was coming. Aya looked up at Kane. "We'll fight together." Kane smiled. "Always." And with that promise, Aya closed her eyes, feeling safe for the first time in a long time, ready to face whatever came next. The people of Haven worked quickly. Alarms were flashing, and everyone was getting ready to defend their home. Ships were moved into position, and guards stood at every entrance with blasters in hand. Captain Kane stood by Aya's side, watching as the people prepared. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Captain Lyra asked Kane. Kane nodded. "I won't let them take her. Not again." Lyra looked at Aya and gave her a kind smile. "We'll protect you, Aya. But remember, you're strong too. You're not just a scared little girl anymore." Aya looked down at her hands. She could still feel the strange energy inside her, the power she didn't fully understand. "I don't know how to control it," she whispered. "You'll figure it out when it's time," Lyra said gently. Suddenly, the alarm got louder. "They're here," someone shouted. On the big screen, everyone saw the slaver ship approaching. It was huge, dark, and filled with dangerous weapons. "They're coming straight for us," Lyra said. "Shields up." The slaver ship fired the first blast. The ground shook, and dust fell from the ceiling. People ran to their stations. Kane turned to Aya. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, don't let them take you." Aya nodded, though fear filled her heart. As the battle began, the fighters from Haven flew out to meet the slavers. Bright lasers filled the sky, ships twisting and turning, fighting to protect the colony. Inside, slaver soldiers broke through the doors and ran inside. Kane pulled out his blaster. "Stay behind me," he shouted to Aya. But as the fight went on, something strange began to happen. Aya could feel a warm energy building inside her, stronger than before. When one of the slaver soldiers pointed a weapon at Kane, Aya suddenly shouted, "No!" A bright purple light shot out from her hands, hitting the soldier and throwing him back. Kane turned, surprised. "Aya, what did you just do?" "I don't know," Aya said, breathing hard. "It just happened." Kane smiled. "You're amazing. You can do this." Aya felt stronger now. She wasn't as afraid. She reached out her hands, and more light began to glow around her. More slavers ran toward them. Kane fired his blaster, but there were too many. "Aya, we need your help," Kane called. Aya took a deep breath. She held out her hands, and a wave of glowing light swept over the soldiers, pushing them back. The people of Haven cheered. Captain Lyra saw it too. She's learning to control it. Aya looked at her hands, amazed. I can help. I can fight. Outside, the slaver ship was still attacking, but the Haven fighters were pushing them back. Inside, Kane and Aya moved together, fighting the soldiers who tried to get closer. You're doing great, Aya, Kane said, covering her as she used her powers. But then, the slaver captain himself, a tall, scary alien, stepped into the room. So this is the little Illyrian girl causing me so much trouble, he sneered. Aya stepped back, fear in her eyes. Kane stood in front of her. You're not taking her. The slaver captain laughed. You think you can stop me? Aya suddenly stepped out from behind Kane. She looked at the captain, her hands glowing. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Aya said bravely. The captain growled and raised his weapon. But before he could fire, Aya sent a powerful blast of energy toward him. It hit him hard, knocking him to the ground. Everyone froze. Aya was breathing hard, but she stood tall. I won't let you hurt anyone. The slaver captain struggled to stand. You'll regret this, girl. Kane aimed his blaster at him. No, you will. The soldiers of Haven surrounded the captain and his men, forcing them to surrender. Outside, the Haven fighters finally damaged the slaver ship enough to make it retreat. Cheers filled the air as the slavers ran away, defeated. Inside, Kane put a hand on Aya's shoulder. You did it. You saved us. Aya looked up at him, her eyes shining. I was so scared, but I didn't want them to hurt anyone. And you stopped them, Kane said proudly. You were brave. Lyra came over and smiled. Aya, you have a gift, and you used it to protect others. That's what makes you special. Aya smiled for real, feeling proud for the first time. Later, as the colony fixed the broken walls and people cheered, Kane and Aya stood together, looking at the stars. What will happen now? Aya asked softly. Kane smiled. Now you have a home, a family, and if anyone comes for you again, we'll fight. Together. Aya nodded. I want to learn more about my powers. I want to help others, like you helped me. Kane smiled. And I'll be right here to help you. As they watched the stars, Aya knew her life had changed forever. She wasn't just a scared little alien girl anymore. She was strong, brave, and free. And with Kane and her new family in Haven, she knew she would never be alone again. From now on, she would protect others, just like Kane had protected her. Together, they would make sure that no one else would be taken by slavers. Because now, Aya had found her place in the universe. Her story was just beginning.